Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to learn the Maimer of Shabbos Parshas Vayishlach, Yudal Kislev, Heitav Shemem Hey, exactly 40 years ago. The Shabbos of Vayishlach that year, as we've stated, was on Yudal Kislev. Yudal Kislev, 14th of Kislev, is the anniversary of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. Now, this year, of course, the anniversary is Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos. And this Maimer that the Rebbe said 40 years ago was in continuation to the Maimer that we learned last week of Adam Ki Yakriv. And the Rebbe will mention it in the first part. So again, like we've stated many times, it's 40 years, which gives us extra energy, strength, and inspiration and power to do what we have to do through the Torah that the Rebbe gives us. Vchol, Bonayich, Limudei Bonayich. It's a verse in Isaiah. And all your sons are those learning the learning of God, and much peace to your sons. Maybe I'll say quick dush made Memorial Posuk Session Yudal Kislev Tofresh Pei Test. The Rebbe's Rebbe and the Rebbe's father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, said in his Maimer that also begins with these words. And he said that Maimer at the Rebbe's wedding. Here the Rebbe refers to it as, he said it on the 14th of Kislev in 5689, which would be in the end of 1928. And the Maimer is printed subsequently in the Sefer Mamorim that includes in it all the booklets of Mamorim that were published separately through the years, called Sefer Mamorim Kontreisim. So the Frierdiker Rebbe brings in that Maimer, Es Mashal Amru Razal, Al Mashakosov, Rab Shleim Bonayich, Al Trikir Bonayich, El Bonayich. We say this every day towards the very end of the davening at Shachris, the morning prayer, that which the sages teach on this verse. It says, don't read it when it says much peace to your sons, your children. Don't read Bonayich, which means sons, ela Bonayich, which means builders, those that build it. The Shalah explains, Ki tevas Bonayich habeis miyuter. The second time it says your sons in this verse is extra, it's superfluous, it's redundant. Because we already know who you're talking about in the beginning, so it's enough. It's enough to say, and all of your sons, your children, are learned, learning of God. And it would be enough that then I would say, and they have much peace. It doesn't have to say, and much peace is also to your sons. So because of the redundancy of this term that it says twice, your sons, we know that then the second one has to be read differently, and therefore it means the builders. What does builders mean? Like the sages teach. My banoin, what are builders? Elo talmidei chachamim, that's the Torah sages, those that learn wisely. Sha'iskim v'binyanim shel olam, like the Limudei Torah, their occupation is building the world through Torah study. Ulhavin kol zeh yesh lakin mashnes boyer, b'dibur maschil adam ki yakriv diyud kislev. So to understand this, we're going to have to, just as by way of introduction, go over what we explained already in the Maimer that we learned last week. Adam, a person who offers the offering that was said on the 10th of Kislev, and in that Maimer the Rebbe explained the verse which was common by the Rebbeim when they had a redemption, Pada b'sholem nafshi, being Pada b'sholem nafshi mikrovli, that my soul was redeemed in peace from battle. The koi alpdiya Torah dafka. This is referring to redemption through Torah specifically. Ki avodah the tefillah hi b'chinas milchama. The serving God through prayer, that's already considered a war. It's tough. Prayer is tough, and it's elevating. You have to work at it. And as the Zohar says, the time of prayer, that's the time of a battle. And that's why it's called avoid. It's work. It's not easy to pray. And like Unkelis translates in the Targum on the verse when Jacob is saying, the land which I took with my sword and my bow, but with my prayer and my beseeching. So those are tools of war, the sword and the bow. That's the idea of prayer. Prayer is like war. But Torah, the service of Torah, that's a redemption in peace. And as we explained earlier in the previous mimer, as at length, when it was based on the discourse of the Middle Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem, that begins with a person who offers, and he's the one who had the redemption, the 10th of Kislev, and as we said then, the Mimer was printed and published on the 10th of Kislev. The Al Kololos of Edis Odom Ksiv, Odom Ki Akriv Mikem, Korban Lavayim. Generally speaking, regarding the way a person serves God, the verse tells us, when it's referring to offerings and sacrifices, Odom Ki Akriv Mikem, Korban Lavayim. A person, when he offers from amongst you the offering to God, Ki Ba'odom Yesh Zera Odom V'Zera Behema. This has both of these ideas. By a person, you have the seed of humanity, the seed of man, and the seed of the animal. These are concepts that were explained in that mimer. The godly soul and the animal soul. And regarding this, it says that a person and an animal, God helps. It's a verse in Psalms, chapter 36. Person receives his energy from above, from God, to be able to elevate the animal, the animalistic part, and the part of the animal soul which is animating the person, and to make sure that it serves its holy purpose and not be influenced by it, which it comes along to want to do all kinds of things. And it's able to elevate it to what's called the human thing, meaning the godly soul. And then he brings the subsequent part of the verse that the offerings are from cattle and from sheep. And then it speaks about the offerings of fowl. There are three general ways that the person serves God to elevate his animal soul. Like it's explained over there, the various aspects of the things that are there. He spoke about the things which are tough. It's the ox and the sheep, which is mercy, and the fowl, which is the most merciful, as we learned. With this, you can see the difference between serving God through prayer and serving God through Torah study. Serving God through prayer and the offerings, that's the battle, the war. But when you're able to affect these things through Torah, there it's already on a much easier way. It's not the tough way of battle. And it happens automatically by itself. This refinement, this work that we do with ourselves, and like our sages tell us, whoever studies and occupies himself with studying the laws of the offerings, it's as if they offered the offerings. Which means that there's even an advantage over the Torah study, learning about the offerings and therefore being considered as you offered it, even better than doing it itself. Because when you do it itself, there's specific times and prescriptions the way it has to get done. Here, anyone could study, so it doesn't matter if you fall into the category of the one that has to do it. For instance, a kohen, etc., like the Rebbe will explain here. You could study about about bringing the offerings. It could be at night. It could be in the diaspora. In other words, and it's like you're bringing the korban right now. Whereas the korban had to be when the temple is standing during the day in the holy temple, etc. That means in a time and a space which wouldn't be fit for bringing the actual offering. And the study could be by anybody, everybody, not just necessarily somebody who was a kohen, a priest. They're the only ones who were able to bring the offering. They represented everybody, but that's it. Nevertheless, even though you may be in the diaspora and maybe at night, not a kohen, you affect through studying about the offerings that it's as if you offered an offering, brought the sacrifice. And on the other hand, the gam ke'asher halimudei dekain bilvad harei upoil the limudei kol inyanim shapolo b'avidus bonus b'pashtus kohenim. And even if a person is a kohen, and is a priest, he's nevertheless through his Torah study able to bring out everything that the offerings were able to accomplish. The pashtus kohenim b'avidosam ulvim b'duchon v'sobam modem. Now kohen had to do his part, right? But he wasn't able to do, for instance, what the Levi did. They had to play the music and offer the praise to God. And there had to be representation from Yisrael, from the whole Jewish people, and the Kohen couldn't be part of that either. But now when he studies the laws of the korban, he's part of that too. So it works for everybody in all the matters of the korban. So this is what is accomplished. For the soul, the animal soul, in refining the animal soul. This is the Navaleh about this. This is what could be done when the Torah is able to affect the animal soul. The Torah is there to make peace. Pada b'sholem, redeeming with peace. Therefore, it's able to affect in a way from the supernal realm to elevate and to go down to the lowest and bring it up and imbue it with peace and holiness, etc. Not having to do the work from the low level. And this is what it means, that there's much peace to your sons and offspring. That your children, that they are the sages that occupy themselves with building the world, they increase peace in the world because through that Torah study. Because the whole Torah was only given to bring peace to the world. Just like the accomplishment and effect of Torah study is to bring the aspect of peace to the world. When the person himself was serving, that when you're bringing the peace to the world, it's also in a peaceful fashion, in a peaceful manner, that you're able to bring it about. So the person who's doing it is also doing it in a way of peace. And like it's explained in the continuum of the discourses which were taught and given by the Chassidic Rebbe, the Rebbe's Rebbe and father-in-law at the time of the wedding, it was over that week, and they're all published in a booklet called Derushe Chasana, which actually the Rebbe distributed on the 14th of Kislev, 5752. This booklet, but then this is the memorim that are printed in the Sefer Memorim that the Rebbe mentions at the beginning of the Maimer here. The Shnas, so they're called the memorim of the wedding, but he said a Maimer the Shabbos for the wedding, the night before the wedding, and at the wedding earlier and then later, and at the Sheva Brachos, etc. So the Shnas Tafresh Peites, and that was in the year of 5689. The Maimer that we started with, Bebir. So as it's explained there regarding this topic, when the Friedrich Rebbe explains, Bebir Esel Sheni Shel Simcha, he explains the 10 terms of happiness. Asher Bora Sosan V'Simcha, like we say in the blessing of marriage, who has created gladness and joy, love, Chulu Avo V'Achva Sholem V'Sholem V'Reus, love and brotherhood and peace and friendship. The ultimate purpose is that serving God should be with love and brotherhood and peace and friendship. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe's Rebbe brings there in that Maimer an example from our father Abraham. His whole idea was to publicize godliness in the world. God may be blessed. That means to bring peace to the world. But he did it in a peaceful fashion. Like it says in several sources. One of them noted here is Orchos Tzadikim. Abraham was a giving person in himself. In other words, like here it says begufa means with his body, but it means he actually did it himself, and with his funding, with his money, with his resources, and with his soul. With several other terms that are explained how Abraham was giving. Only some of them are explained in that discourse. The Rebbe adds here that we also find something similar with the one who had the redemption on the 10th of Kislev, the Mittler Rebbe. Not only did he give with his soul, because he was righteous and he helped other people with his teaching, etc., and his advice, and his Torah, his Torah learning and his Torah sharing, etc., and telling people how they could pray and how they can come closer spiritually to God. That was one of the main things. But more than that, maybe the Rebbe says, and this is possibly also his primary thing. We don't know what's the greatest and what's really the main thing that Rebbe says here. He was also giving in his of his resources and with his financial resources. And he worked hard himself to make it easier for the Jewish people. That he was like we mentioned in that mimer, that he wanted to make sure that the Chassidus should be affordable, and therefore he made sure that in various ways to give it out in small booklets, etc. The Rebbe doesn't mention here explicitly, but it's known also that he and possibly the Rebbe alludes to this when he says here Vchol. There are other things here that the Rebbe doesn't say. The Mittler Rebbe established colonies for agricultural purposes that gave resources to the Jewish people to be able to farm the land and make produce and therefore earn a living and have where to live, etc. And that may be what the Rebbe is referring to here. So in other words, this is like Avraham Avinu, he spread Torah, but he also did literally physical things. Here the Rebbe only mentions about making it easier financially because they wouldn't have to spend a lot of money for the Torah. That was also one of the things he did. But the Rebbe says, etc., so that possibly is included in the etc. This may also be the connection to the rejoicing of bride and groom. Remember, this is said on the Rebbe's wedding anniversary, and not only is it said on the Rebbe's wedding anniversary, but the Rebbe is also saying over the Torah, which was said at the weddings, which speaks about Chosn and Kala. So the Rebbe is connecting it all here. What's the idea of marriage? The Rebbe says this is a lesson in life. Ki hinei hashiduch de Chosn v'Kala inyonei hu chibur shnei havchem. A match between a groom and a bride. The whole idea is to connect two opposites. Ki ish v'isha him shnei havchim. A man and a woman are opposites, two opposites. Kimfush b'Torah become mekemis, like it's explicitly explained in several places in Torah. Uchanida b'mochish, and as you could see it quite literally and simply. Gam ba'olam kipshutei. Actually, in the world, that a man and a woman are opposite. So even if you didn't have the Torah source, you might have figured this out on your own. There's even an example coming up from our father Abraham, and our mother Sarah. Now, this example is an interesting example. Abraham was very all giving. He was very, very totally just giving and giving and giving. Generous, very generous. Thank you. And Mashenkin al Sora Razal, listen to this, they're tough. Our sages are tough. Because regarding Sarah, they said, here we see from the story of Abraham and Sarah, when the angels came, we see that Sarah, the woman is more stingy with the guests. Oh, how did they figure this out? Well, it's a Gemara Bava Metzia, you could look it up, page 87. A lot of other things are learned from this Gemara, a lot of phenomenal things of what happened in that story, the phenomenal story of Abraham and Sarah being visited, the angels being blessed, promised by God for they'll have a child, etc., etc. So what happened over there? You remember Abraham got 3 animals because each one had to have a whole tongue, etc., etc. And he tells her that she should come, she should make the bread, right? So he said Abraham had to tell her, knead the dough and make the cakes, meaning the bread. Now the Gemara there explains that you see the word kemach and soiles. There's two for the way flour is made today. I'm not aware of the different names for the flour, but one is more, we say fine flour. It's more of a finely ground, and so soiles is much, I guess, either more expensive or fancy or whatever. So she was going to make the cakes with kemach, and then it says there that they did it with soy. Avram had her do it with soiles. So that was her whole stingy thing. She was to bake, and now, by the way, she would have to work harder to make it from the kemach because it's a little harder to work with. But this is not always easy to understand. And it also takes the woman to temper that type of kindness. Had to be also tempered, like many times, one member of the couple is I don't want to say too generous, because I don't know if you could ever be too generous, but even generosity has to also be tempered, because too much of something can be harmful, etc. So the Chacham don't, God forbid, mean to denigrate her, but to say that this is the way she had to deal with it. So, and nevertheless, Abraham said to make it with the fine flour. So, she was a fine woman, and therefore she did the will of her husband. This is what is accomplished. This is the navalei. This is what's made up of the combination and the union of a groom and a bride. Although they are both opposites, the woman is a kosher woman, so to speak, a befitting woman who does the will of her husband, and it says in several places she makes up the will of her husband. She makes what the husband's will should be. They become one unit. They become one flesh. And of course, that's a reference. That's a verse in Genesis, and it's also a reference to children. The children are from both. The Yesod, and the foundation of this idea of this union is love and brotherhood and peace and friendship. Peace that is drawn forth specifically from the Torah, and it has the ability to make peace between opposites. What does this mean in our service to God? Day to day, so Sarah, our mother, even though she was, so to speak, stingy with the guests, nevertheless she was the befitting woman that did the will of her husband. Shezeu inyan ha'iskafia. This is the idea of there are two ideas of iskafia and ishapcha, which we'll talk about here. So ishapcha is transformation, iskafia is subduing, and abstinence, something like that. In other words, bending back, holding back from something. So she wanted to do it one way, but she did it the other way. And as we know the difference between the transformation and the negation, which is iskafia, the inyan ishapcha hu kameshakos of Gabi David Vchol bekirbi. So the idea of transformation is like it says regarding King David. It says about himself. It says in the Psalms, Vchol bekirbi, my heart is a hole within me, meaning here the heart is a reference to the animal soul, the evil inclination. Sheinli itzahara shahorgi b'tainis. He didn't have the evil inclination anymore because he killed it by his fasting, by doing so much service of God. Tzaddikim can get to this level of libi chol bekirbi that they don't have any more of an evil inclination. They get rid of it completely. So King David said it explicitly. Oh yes, it al kain kasher mahapech zeitzahar latoiv, and then a greater level of a tzaddik is to transform his evil inclination to good. Mashenkin iskafia in yonoi da'av sheyesh mitzish zeitzahara, but abstinence and negation is the idea of iskafia, of subduing, meaning that even although we have the evil inclination, but he forces it and subdues it, make sure it's not followed. So that's a greater idea, because here you have, in a certain sense, because you have the evil inclination, you don't listen. So that's a great accomplishment. Once he got rid of it, a tzaddik, he has no more will to even do something wrong. There's already no more temptation. Everyone else has temptation, you have to subdue the temptation. So that's the advantage of subduing and negation to transformation. It's explained in several places. That's why when Mashiach comes in the future to come, we will still mention the Exodus from Egypt. The idea of the Exodus from Egypt is the idea of subduing and negation. We left Egypt and its influences, etc. Like when it explains, when the Torah describes the Exodus, it says the nation fled. Like the Tanya explains, that's also getting away from evil things, which are represented by Egypt. So although this was only subduing and negating evil, I just reread the line. When Mashiach comes, the prophet tells us in Zechariah that the spirit of impurity will be removed from the earth. So there won't be any impure spirit at all on earth anymore. It won't exist. So when Mashiach comes, it says God will take away all this. Our main occupation will be to pursue goodness. Nevertheless, even though we'll be at such a time of bliss and a great spiritual pursuit, the Mashiach has come, and the spirit of impurity is gone. But nevertheless, we'll still mention the Exodus, which represents the time of Golus, the time of exile, and when we were negating and subduing the evil to get to this spot. So although now that won't be an active pursuit, because it won't be around anymore, but still we will mention it because of its advantage that it had, of the hard work that it brought about. So, as it's explained in several Chassidic discourses, the Lubavitcher Rebbe also explains it in the above mentioned Maimer that we learned. What's the difference between holiness and purity? Hu she'atara hu b'makom sheyesh tuma. So purity is only, you speak about the advantage of purity when there's impurity. When there's impurity, so then you can speak about purity. And as the verse says, who will give purity from impurity. Mashenki kedusha meloshin kodesh removal, but holiness just means it's holy, and holy, it means separated. It's off on its own. It didn't have to have impurity involved. It's holy. It's dedicated. It's set aside. Each one of them has something the other one doesn't have. And that's the idea of the union of Abraham and Sarah. For that matter, every single man and woman amongst Israel, here that I was talking about, this is the day of his marriage, etc. They are the offspring of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the daughters of Sarah, etc. Meaning our matriarchs, yes, because they also have this idea of subduing evil and negating, etc. And this is the idea of my soul being redeemed in peace. When did David say it? When he was fighting with his son Absalom, who was giving him a hard time. Now, the Gemara in Bracha says that this verse refers to the three things: to one who occupies himself with the Torah, with benevolence, and prays with the quorum, with the minyan, with the group, with the tzibur. And this is the three pillars upon which the world stands: Torah and serving God, meaning the prayer, and benevolence. But what is specific and special about this is that in each one of these things you have the idea of peace and the connection of things that are specifically opposite, and we combine them. Hainu, Hein, Bchol, Echad, Megimel, and Yonim. In all three of these things, Hainu Shatayra Pe'el Shalom. First of all, the Torah brings about peace, as Rashi says there in the Gemara, V'chein Gimel Chesodem, Eis Shalom, Bein Hamashpiyah V'Makabel, and benevolence makes peace between the one that's giving and the giver and the receiver. Haoni Balabayis, the poor person, and the one who is giving. The poor person comes to the home, and the master of the home gives them something. And by prayer too. When do you say peace in prayer? Especially since by prayer you have to be totally subjugated, and it has to be like a servant standing before the master. And if you're like a servant for the master and you're thinking only about the master, then what do you care then what'll be what everyone else is doing? And may I say here parenthetically that the Rebbe speaks here about the importance, and this Maimer and many, many other Maimorim, especially in conjunction with Yutas Kislev, the idea of praying with a minyan, and it's so important. And sometimes when we pray with a minyan, it's tough, because you have to say, that means you're going to say the Amidah together with everybody at that time, which means you have to either start earlier if they pray a little too fast, or go slower, even though you want to go faster. You can't do it when you want to do it. You're praying with the quorum, and that's a great thing here. And a lot of people struggle with this because it's hard. You can't do it the way you want to do it. You have to do it with everybody. But that's what God is asking, and therefore it says Hein Kel Kaber Yimos, that when you pray, even if you have rough things going, but if you pray with the quorum, God listens and God helps out. So here the Rebbe says one of the things that even though you're standing, you're so totally submitted to God, but nevertheless you're paying attention because you're part of the group, and that is such a great quality, and like I said, something that we have to work on. So the stress here is that you should specifically pray with the tzibur, with the minyan. I wanted to say another thing parenthetically. What about if somebody is in a place where the minyan davens very fast, where the group goes quickly? Our Rebbe gave us a gift, and he said, look, Chassidic says you have to daven Also, paying special attention, slower, etc. So the Rebbe says, but if you start with the group, with the minyan, then even if you go slow and you didn't, but it's as if you prayed with that quorum, which is a gift that the Rebbe gave. But you only have that gift if you start with everybody. Doesn't mean come when you like, and there's look, I'm going to pray a long time, so I'm anyway not going to die with a minyan. No. You start when everybody starts. And then you have this gift that the Rebbe gave. Till here's the rant. Okay, now let's continue. So, Inyan HaSholem, this is the idea of peace. V'hein b'chlol, and in a general way, Shasholem K'el is called Gimel Hinyon, and peace includes the three things of a Torah, the Torah of Edith Gubus Chasadim, Torah, and service, and benevolence, Shem Hinyonim Shaidim. They're all three different things: Torah study, prayer, and working with people in a benevolent fashion. And in this verse, it all becomes one thing: bringing peace through Torah, through prayer, through benevolence. And it's explained at length in the writings of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, on the Tehillim, on this verse. The book is called Yahaloyer. Now it says, all of your children who are learned in learning God's Torah, and much peace for all the children. It says koil, all. It doesn't say. It could have said Bonayich Limudei Hashem and your children, but it says Vchol, all, kol daike, specifically all. To this, that the Israel, the Jewish people, occupy themselves with Torah. The Torah makes peace amongst the Jewish people in Israel, the Israelites. All of Yisrael, all Israelites, every Yid is included in the Torah K'maimer, like it says that the word Yisrael, which we read in the Parsha of the week in Vayishlach, which this Maimer was said in the week of Vayishlach, when Jacob got his name Yisrael, that it stands for, it's an acronym, Yisrael, Rosh Tevis, Yashishim Ribu Eisis LaTorah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. You know that there's 300,000 and something, if you count the 305,000, etc. But nevertheless, every place where there should be a Vav or a Yud, because of those vowels, if you add those up, you'll come up to around 600,000. So, there are 600,000 letters in the Torah. This is what we mean, this is what we started with, all of your children. All Jews unite together through Torah, and through this we become the builders. We're occupying ourselves with the building of the world. Now the world was already created complete. God created the world, not us, but He left us something to do. So the world was created with everything in it, ready for us to have and to use. In the most utmost fulfilled way possible. But nevertheless, we increase in this and we make it more. Told us, it shouldn't only be, this is the offspring of heaven and earth. And there, when it says that in Genesis, it says told us male. The word told us, which means the offspring, is written with two vavs, male. Elagam, ve'ela told us peretz. We'll also come now to where it says in the book of Ruth that these are the offspring of Peretz, when it speaks about the lineage of King David. So there it also says the offspring with two vavs. So it's a juxtaposition and a comparison. That it says the word told us is usually written with one vav. There's not a vav at the beginning of the word. But in these two places, it says mole with two vavs. First of all, when it speaks about the heaven and earth, which teaches us that the world was created complete. And then it also teaches us when it says the offspring of Peretz, that the world will be complete when Mashiach comes. told the Smoli, told the Zehu L'maylam, told the Sarishan. So the second time where it says told us when Mashiach comes, it's even more complete than when the world was created, because we've improved it and brought about the era of Mashiach. Kihu b'bchinas peretz, and that's in a way, in a fashion of peretz, which is the offspring of peretz. Peretz means strong, strength. Paratz tolacha paretz. Even when this peretz was born, if you remember, he's the second child born to Tamar. He would have been the second child. The first child stuck out his hand, if you remember correctly. So the midwife tied a ribbon on his hand so they know which one is first, and then the other child was born first. So they called him Peretz because he burst through with strength. He went past the other brother whose hand had the ribbon on it, and then that child's name was Zerach, which means shiny. So he became the first child. That also is a symbol of strength. So when he's born, he's called Peretz, and because of the strength that he had, Paratz Tolacha Peretz, and his descendant is Mashiach. And also, like we read in last week's parsha, Jacob was promised by God that you'll be strong and you'll spread forth west and east and north and south. And it comes through the Torah and mitzvahs that the world is so improved through the Torah and the mitzvahs that were performed and studied through the 6,000 years that the world was around before Mashiach came. Through this you come to Torah study from the mouth of Mashiach. We'll be able to see Mashiach. And before Mashiach comes, and as a preparation, we learn the inner secrets of the Torah, the innermost of the Torah, Chassidic teachings, Chassidic memorim of the Rebbe, etc. Shehi may aim to Mashiach. That's as if it's not only a precursor, but it's like a part. It's of the Torah of Mashiach. The less tam and lekush of the machlekes. There's no questions and arguments. Chassidus is straightforward and straight up. It's not a discussion back and forth, and it's without like the discussion that you have in the revealed part of Torah. So therefore, it's already, when we learn Chassidus, it's like we're already learning the Torah of Mashiach. It's a little piece of that. Till we're going to come to the revelation of the Torah of Mashiach from the mouth of Mashiach. Maybe the will of God that we actually merit to have this in its true fashion. Simply said, lower than 10 handbreadths, meaning actually so, and speedily nowadays, actually so, Amen L'chaim.